Welcome. It's Council Cabinet on Wednesday, the 13th of January 2021. Do we have any apologies? Well, I'm going to say two, which is Councillor Poulter and Councillor Williams. Do we have any other apologies that we're aware of?
None that we're aware of.
Thank you. Item 2 is late items. I'm not aware of any.
No, there are none.
Thank you. Item 3 is receipt of petitions. I'm not aware of any.
There are none.
And item 4 is identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply. And again, I'm not aware of any.
Yes, there is. It's item 9, the council tax base.
Thank you for clarification on that one. Okay.
Thank you.
Item 5 then is declarations of interest. Has anyone got a declaration of interest they'd like to raise at this point? Okay, no. If something comes to mind during the meeting, then please speak up. And we can have that recorded. Item 6 then is minutes of the meeting held on the 9th and the 16th of December 2020. Are there any issues with those minutes, or are we going to agree them as printed and read?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, just a little bit of housekeeping then. We have the group leaders from the opposition groups, Labour, Liberal Democrats and Reform Party, or the Reform Group, and they're in attendance to raise queries on the agenda items and ask questions. And we also have the chair of Exec Scrutiny, who will be invited to introduce the recommendations from the meeting that was held last night in reference to the reports that are being brought to Cabinet today. That's for a professional meeting, and that contributions are respectful, succinct, and based on the reports being considered this afternoon. As we normally do, item 7 talks about the recommendations from the Executive Scrutiny Board. Well, we take those, we're going to take those on an item by item basis rather than all at once. So I will then move on to item 8, which is Ravensdale Infant and Nursery School, the new school project, introduced by Andy, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this report seeks approval to progress the work required to rebuild Ravensdale Infant School following the major fire that I know colleagues on the call will be aware of. And as the report outlines, work is continuing at pace to plan for the new school. Approval is being sought for 2 elements of the proposed recovery plan being developed currently. The first is around the completion of the design works for a capital scheme for a permanent new replacement school building. And the second is placing orders and payments to secure key components of the new building, including steelwork for the modular units. These costs will be funded from the insurance settlement. Once the design process is complete and final agreements have been reached with the insurer on the new school building, a further report will be presented, and we anticipate that will be in April at Cabinet. It's anticipated that the overall capital cost of the new school will be around £8 million. The new building will be designed to include sprinklers, which is positive. The design of the new school is being developed in close partnership with the Ravensdale Infant School leadership team. Project design and governance meetings have been established to ensure detailed engagement and robust project management. The new school is likely to be built for April-May 2022. Decant arrangements are in place for the children to minimise disruption to learning. So I would ask Cabinet to agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.5 in the report.
Chair, you're on mute.
There we go. That was the first time of the year. Before I move on to other contributions, this is in my ward, and whilst this is a very positive report, I had wished that we hadn't have to deal with it because of the circumstances, which were obviously very difficult for everybody involved. But it's great that we're moving forward at a pace to resolve this situation. What I'd ask for is Councillor Repton to offer an overview of the Executive Scrutiny Board resolutions, please, at this stage, and then we can move on to any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to 1, welcome the inclusion of sprinklers in the new school, and 2, to recommend to Council Cabinet that the new school should be designed to be carbon zero in operation from the start, or at least that the design allows for the buildings to be made carbon zero in an efficient manner in the near future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. We'll discuss that, I think, in a little bit more detail shortly. But do we have any questions from opposition group leaders at this point?
Chair, if I may.
Okay, Councillor Shanker.
I agree with you. Welcome this report so we can get on with building the new school, but absolutely would have preferred we didn't have to discuss this here today. For me, it's just around the planning. April, May 22 is a date which is set for the opening and use of the new school. What measures have we got in place to make sure we take any opportunities to bring that date forward, but more so we ensure that we don't occur any slippages and lose track of that date and delay the return of the opening of the school?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Shanker. I think the first thing to say broadly is that the team that are involved in building schools and designing schools and increasing school places in the City Council has a really strong track record of delivering to deadlines that are set, and that's been the case for a number of years. That goes right back to the BSF programme, 10 plus years ago. I think, like in any major programme such as this, there are really clear stages that have to take place with very strong governance around it, both within the City Council, with developers and with the school, and everything is monitored very closely. And certainly at this point in time, the timescales that have been set have been worked through very clearly. So I think I can speak with confidence today that the timescales of April, May 2022 are deliverable based on what needs to be done and based on what we've done thus far and what needs to happen moving forward. I mean, clearly, if things come left field that we're not anticipating, then that would need to be reviewed, and there are opportunities in order to do that as we progress this moving forward. So I'm confident that what's before the Cabinet today is informed by discussions with the key officers, with Ravensdale, with developers, and with the insurers. And clearly, when we bring the report back in April, we'll be able to provide any updates in relation to that, and hopefully further assurance that we're on track with the timescales that are set today.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Councillor Skelton.
I was just again wondering about the timescales. I know that not that long ago, obviously Mickleover Primary School was rebuilt, and that I think was 6 classrooms and some porter cabins as well. But that whole project took about a year. So I'm just wondering, kind of year to kind of almost 18 months. Is it sort of stretching a bit longer than it should?
Well, I mean, all I can reiterate, Councillor Skelton, is that certainly the planning that has gone into this has been well thought through in terms of what's required. Once that decision was made that a whole school rebuild was necessary, and there are various checks and balances along the way, and there's some robust governance around this. So I think I just want to reiterate again that the planning and the governance around this has really worked through what needs to be required and what the timescales are. So, there'll be an opportunity for Cabinet to scrutinise and indeed exec to scrutinise the progress when we bring the further report in April. But I am confident, based on the current assessment, that the timescales outlined here, leading up to April, May 2022, have been thought through and worked through robustly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Priya?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reiterate Councillor Repton's point, really, on behalf of myself and Connie, about being carbon zero and climate conscious with the whole process, really. I don't know if you want to go into any detail now about how much that has been incorporated into the project, but obviously from a young person's perspective, we wanted to just say that, really.
Absolutely. I'll cover that now if you like. So that is in reference to the Scrutiny Board's second recommendation. So my response to that would be that the new school is going to be designed in line with DFE school building design guidelines. for new school buildings and comply with all the modern building regulation requirements. But I'd go one further. I can't, and I've said this before in these contexts before, whilst I can't accept and agree zero carbon from the start, what assurances I can give is that we will always seek on new builds, whether they be residential or public buildings or schools or whatever, we'll always seek to ensure that they're green and they have low carbon measures installed into them. So I can certainly give not just yourself but Scrutiny board that assurance. But I will be recommending to Cabinet to note both the recommendations that have been put forward on this one. Are there any other contributions on this item before we move forward to agreeing the recommendations? Okay, so with all that said then, we've been asked to, as a Cabinet, to recommend recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5. Are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Moving on then, we have item 9, which is council tax base for 2021 and 22, introduced by Simon, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to remind members that the council has a legal requirement to determine a council tax base as of the 1st of December in respect of translating our number of houses registered for council tax in the city into a series of Band D equivalents. The methodology is consistent with previous years, but I will highlight just a few points from the report for you. Firstly, that as a result of the COVID pandemic and the potential impact on collection of council tax, instead of what you would normally see, which is an increase in the council tax base, this report actually highlights a reduction in the council tax base, i.e. the number of Band D equivalents that we can charge council tax on. That's equivalent to 47 properties, and the details behind that are primarily set out in paragraph 4.5. So this report highlights a reduction in the assumed collection rate from 97.7% to 97.5%, and it also reflects an increase in people that we provide council tax support to, which is for people working age, they have to pay 30% of the council tax, and the council will pay 70%. And the impact of that on this report has been in excess of 400,000. That is not unexpected. We recognised that in our medium-term financial plan and in our forecasts, and is inevitably a consequence of the uncertain financial climate and household situations arising from COVID. The other recommendation, apart from agreeing the Band D figure, which will be used for council tax setting purposes, is to approve changes in the empty property premium charges from 1st of April 2020-21. And I think all members will realise that bringing empty properties back into use is very important for communities, very important in dealing with blight and also often antisocial behaviour. And you can see there that there's a couple of criteria which talk about either a premium of 100% or 200% to try and encourage owners to bring their properties back into occupation, and that's important to meet the housing needs of the city. So in conclusion, Chair, this report is obviously a hard hit because of the impact of COVID, but is consistent with what we have reported in the medium-term financial plan, which is currently out for consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Scrutiny Board resolved to note the report. Before I invite any questions from group leaders, Nicola, as the Cabinet member of this, do you have any contribution at this stage?
No, just to identify alongside Simon that this shows a clear indication of that we're considering the impact that COVID-19 is having on residents, and that's something that is very much in our minds as a Cabinet and as an administration going forwards. We've got to start to look at the potential and future impacts of COVID-19 has on not only the individuals, the council taxpayers, but also as the council as a whole, really.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions or queries from group leaders?
Yes, if I may. It's Alan Graves.
Yes, Councillor Graves.
Can Simon tell me if the council's had what success there is in bringing houses back into use via the methods that he's just talking about, by making it more difficult for owners to leave their properties empty and going derelict? Have we got any information as to how effective that tool has been?
I do not, but Ian Fullinger, our Head of Strategic Housing, is on the call for the last item and may have information. If not, we might have to share it with you after this meeting.
Before he comes in, I have anecdotal evidence that it has worked in areas. Particularly, we had a number of units in Spondon, which is on our main street, that were above the shop there, and that was used within that, and was key in instrumental into bringing those online as new developments. So I've seen it in action, and it has worked on occasion. But I would refer to the gentleman Simon refers to in relation to the overall of the city impact.
We can certainly get that information to you, Councillor Graves, offline, if not in this meeting, no problem. Yeah. Any other contributions or questions at this stage? Okay, so I'm asking Cabinet to agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.3. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on then to item 10, which is financial support for families during school holidays. So this is going to be introduced by Andy.
Thank you, Chair. The aim of this paper is to present a set of bold recommendations to Cabinet which are designed to help and support children and families in poverty across Derby across the school holidays. The proposals are in line with the priorities of the Council and the wider Derby partnership of improving outcomes for disadvantaged children in receipt of free school meals and providing wraparound services and support for the most vulnerable households to maximise benefit take-up, develop practical skills such as preparing meals on a budget, as well as providing access to other support and services through the Advice Alliance and the Council's Welfare Reform Service. This approach and the recommendations outlined in the report are absolutely aligned to Derby's recovery plan as the city emerges out of the COVID-19 pandemic this year, and has been developed in active partnership with the community and voluntary sector, who will be key in taking this forward. The strong working relationships with Community Action Derby and the Food for Thought Alliance have been essential in supporting the city's communities throughout the pandemic, and has already improved children's lives in Derby in concrete and tangible ways. The approach outlined in the report builds on these foundations and will be an important plank in how the city tackles food poverty for our disadvantaged families. At the heart of the programme is the Department for Education's Holiday Activity and Food Programme. This scheme is eligible for all children in receipt of free school meals, the aim of which is to provide children and young people that attend with a nutritious meal, as well as academic support, sports and wellbeing activities. This scheme will run for 6 weeks in total during the Easter, summer and Christmas holiday period in 2021. When the DfE holiday scheme is not in operation during the spring and autumn half-term holidays, then the Council will provide free school meal vouchers to children, thus ensuring there is a complete support for those who are vulnerable throughout the year. Surrounding this will be a range of other options designed to ensure that those children and young people not attending the holiday programme could have access to a food parcel or a voucher. Council officers have been working actively to co-design this approach alongside Community Action Derby and Food for Thought, who are the city's experts in providing voluntary sector support to our vulnerable communities. This is truly a partnership approach, and with your permission, Chair, shortly I'll invite Bernard Fenton to update the Cabinet on this work and provide a bit more detail about the scheme and the work that he's been doing with Community Action Derby and Food for Thought. Proposals in the paper are broadly for the period April to December this year. One of the recommendations is for the newly established Derby Partnership Poverty Commission to consider and recommend options for a more sustainable model from 31st of December this year going into 2022, which will further utilise, I hope, the strengths and positive relationships the Council has with the voluntary and community sector. Clearly, the context we are operating in is very dynamic, and it is for all of us at the moment. We are all living through a pandemic, unprecedented times when it's never been as important to have a strong partnerships across the city with our partners. We're currently during a further lockdown with schools closed except for vulnerable children and children of critical workers, and the government has committed to ensuring that during lockdown, children who are eligible for free school meals continue to receive either a voucher or food parcel, which means that lockdown periods are covered by government funding. Subject to Cabinet approval, the next step will be the design of the process, which will report to the Derby Partnership Poverty Commission, and this will involve work across council services with Community Action Derby to ensure that it reaches as many families as possible in order to mitigate any disadvantage. And with your permission now, Chair, if I could just ask Bernard to come in and just provide a bit more detail and just talk about the work with Food for Thought and CAD, Community Action Derby.
Absolutely, if you can bring Bernard in. Thank you.
Bernard?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy. To add to the description of the programme that Andy has just delivered, I'd like to highlight, Chair, the long proven track record we have of working with vulnerable families and individuals across the city in providing support for them in challenging times. This work goes back to November 2016, specifically, Chair, with the introduction of the single discretionary award scheme, which gives help for families with rent, council tax payments, as well as issuing vouchers, food parcels and utility top-ups, and importantly, access to personalised support programmes, Chair, to try and understand the underlying issues and address them with some resilience over the long term. As Andy said, in Derby we do have a very proven track record in using a partnership approach to address citywide issues with a combination of, as most people on this call know, organisations from across the city and council services working together to not only use their specialist service and skills, but really use the community knowledge to build resilient solutions. We've seen this in how the council and the city of Derby, alongside the schools and community groups, have supported the city and families during this period, and that has included food support, Chair. Through the pandemic, we've also developed citywide alliances that Andy was referring to, such as Food for Thought and the Money Advice Alliance. And we are regularly working on all sorts of details around the provision that we currently have and how we can better use and make more use of the skills and experience that we have across that partnership. A very good example of this is we're using the community insight that this partnership brings in the recent COVID winter grant scheme. Those partners are referring households. They're using their community insight to refer households who would benefit the most from a winter fuel payment and access to support services. And that, Chair, is going very well at the minute, and it is proving to identify those vulnerable families who would most benefit. We are working with Community Action Derby, as Andy says, and the Food for Thought Partnership, putting together detailed plans on how we will implement the proposals should they be agreed, which includes looking at how we make best use of the development of community shops that will work around, which will work in addition to the items that Andy has highlighted. I wanted to reassure you, Chair, that the partnership is committed to using its wealth of experience and insight into ensuring that this programme, this proposal, is implemented for the benefit of the most vulnerable families in the city.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll be bringing you in to answer queries from group leaders shortly. Councillor Wilson, would you like to contribute at this point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to note that obviously I am covering on behalf of Councillor Williams today, and I am trying my best to get across all the points that I feel that she would try and get out today in relation to all the hard work that's been put into this paper. It's been a really considered paper. There's been a lot of thought gone into what this means for for Derby, and we have as a cabinet, and Yvonne herself has been looking at the wider decider outcomes of what was effectively asked within the original motion. We all want to help and support those disadvantaged children, and I think it's clear that the free school meals element is an important one. And during this, I think the heart of the proposal includes the holiday activity and food programme. I think we've touched on how that's really important to ensure that there's nutritious meals available, as well as the academic support and sports and activities involved around that. There are a number of other options though, so that those that aren't able to attend the holiday activity programmes will be able to access food parcels, stroke vouchers, dependent on the need and the school. And I think it's important that that is recognised as part of the work that's ongoing. There's access to a range of additional services within this, which will help to develop the skills and resilience within the most vulnerable households in our city. I think it is important to note that a voucher of a description will help as a one-off in a short term, and I think it's important that we help to educate those parents to provide nutritious meals, as well as enable them to budget correctly and to support them in the long term. And I think that everything that has gone into this as a report clearly shows that has been an overall consideration. I think it's important to note again that as part of the full council process, this decision has been passed to us as a cabinet because it was brought as a full council motion. It's been extremely important that we understand that this is a council cabinet decision on that, purely on the fact that as a motion, because it is a executive business, it does have a significant impact on our MTFP. That is within our rights to look at this and to establish the best course of action that we can see will be of an overall benefit. And I think the report clearly specifies that within section 6 that we have considered all the options, and the financial sustainability of this is a key factor in making sure that we can continue to not only tackle the issue but the root cause of the issue, to ensure that we can help to resolve child poverty and to reduce that as much as possible. There are several other key points that I'm keen to share on behalf of Councillor Williams, and that is that we continue to look at this in the round, working with our partners. It's really been key, and I think that our other councillors, colleagues here today, will recognise that the partnership working that we've had with the community sections and the voluntary sectors during the COVID-19 pandemic has been an absolute key function to be able to get through this time, and the work that's gone into this recommendation has been carried out during a pandemic. This is the most difficult time in our history of something that we have had to do. So I'd just like to specifically thank the officers and as much as importantly the community sector and the volunteers that have helped us to tackle that, and I think they are going to be key to align us within the Derby Recovery Plan in the future to tackle this problem also. In response to tackling the poverty, in response we've also created a poverty commission, which I know that Yvonne was very keen to. She was involved in historically with the poverty work that was done previously, and I know that she's been extremely keen to ensure that that's an independent way of oversight and implementing the recommendation of this paper in particular, and that will be chaired by Peter Robinson, the Dean of the Derby Cathedral. and it has the full support and backing of the City Partnership Board. I know the group leaders will be invited to sit on that, and it will provide the officers and the partners with how we take forward the continuation of this work to ensure that this is tackled at the root cause, and that we can help people out of this situation and up and into a better position going forward. So just to reiterate all of those, and I'll take any questions and the scrutiny recommendations as best I can on behalf of Councillor Williams.
And thank you, Nicola, for covering for Yvonne at fairly short notice. You've done a great job, and thank you for that. So at this point, before I open up to questions to group leaders, can I ask Councillor Repton to present the Exec Scrutiny Board recommendations, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as an introduction to that, following controversial inadequate food packages being delivered to struggling families, Marcus Radford said only yesterday that we can do better than this. I maintain Derby can and must do better than this. We must enact in full the November Council motion and deliver adequate support in a non-stigmatising way. Families don't need educating. They need the food vouchers we agreed to give them. So let me move on to the Executive Scrutiny Board recommendations. 1. To recommend to Council Cabinet that it implements in full the motion agreed at full Council to provide children and families with support via vouchers for all holidays in 2021 and beyond. 2. To recommend to Council Cabinet that the Poverty Commission consider the outputs of the work of the CYP Scrutiny Board 2018-19 topic review on child poverty in the City as part of its deliberations. And 3. To recommend to Council Cabinet that these items on additional financial support for families during the school holidays be included in the MTFP presented to Council in February. Thank you, Chair.
For those watching, MTFP is Medium Term Financial Plan, by the way, rather than the acronym. Okay, so we'll hold fire on responding to those recommendations. Myself or Nicola will deal with those in due course. I'm now going to ask for contributions, questions and queries from the group leaders. So I'm not quite sure who wishes to go first. I can't see any sort of virtual hands up.
Helps, Matt. I'll go first if that helps.
Okay, Councillor Shanker.
Thank you. A few observations first, and then a few questions for Andy, if I may, and then I'll probably ask to come back on those again. So let's just be totally clear: the work that the Community Action Derby and the Food for Thought Alliance are doing is excellent, and they've helped the city. Particularly Community Action Derby for many years, but particularly in recent months in response to COVID, and that's welcomed. Having said that, we can't keep hiding behind them organisations each time the City Council wants to bring in something which they think is slightly controversial. We seem to be saying, oh, this has got the backing of Community Action Derby, everything's hunky-dory. I don't think that's helpful both for the Council or Community Action Derby itself. A couple of questions I've got then on the holiday activity and food programme. Based on the finances contained in this report, Andy or Bernard, how many children do we expect over the year to use the services at these activities in order to not only just access the activities, but obviously to be importantly in relation to this paper is to be fed. So that's just a question on how many we expect to be at the activities. We've also said on a number of occasions, I think both Andy and Nicola said, this is a comprehensive programme and it helps children throughout all the holidays in this year. But from my understanding, we cover the 2 half-term holiday weeks with vouchers. We cover 4 of the 6 weeks holidays during the summer. We cover 1 week of activities at Easter and 1 week of activities at Christmas. So what are we doing on those other 4 weeks to provide the most vulnerable provide for the most vulnerable families. And the third point, if you could clarify for me, because I think it takes, if it's right in what's been said earlier, it takes all the controversy out of this paper. What we've said is those people who can't attend the activities will be entitled to a food parcel or a voucher, is what Andy said, and Nicola, you said a food parcel stroke voucher. So if that's genuinely the case, anybody who can't attend the activity club is entitled to a free school meal voucher, and every single child who's entitled to free school meals is entitled to that voucher. I think it takes all the controversy away from this paper. Could you just answer those three questions first, please?
Shall I come in first, and then Bernard might want to add some detail to that? So we know how many children are eligible for free school meals in the city, and we know that that number has increased, and that's positive in the sense of those children being able to obtain a meal while they're in school. What we need to do, and that's in the paper, Baggy, in terms of the next steps, is to really now front load the design of the programme, which is going to be really important, and that's going to involve partners from across the council, particularly within children's social care and early help, within our school services, and with the voluntary sector, so that we are designing a programme that really tries to target families and to try and identify families and children and young people, so that we can encourage and facilitate children and families attending, or children and young people attending, the holiday activities. We also need to think about the nature of the activities, and we're expecting further guidance on the holiday activity and food programme to be coming out imminently. There are some meetings with DfE that are scheduled, I think, for either the end of this week or next week, which is going to give us some more detail in relation to this, so that we are ready to go with this from April of this year for the Easter holidays, and then we can build on that. And we might want to develop and tweak and slightly amend things as we move forward, but clearly it's going to be really important to make sure that we're devising the right activities in the right locations, and it will be very much a locality approach, I think, we'll take, but that detail will come through the planning, so that we can really try and target and encourage as many children and young people to attend the holiday activities as possible. What the paper also describes, though, is that clearly there's an element of choice, isn't there, within this for families as well. And, you know, some families may see this as a really positive thing. Some families may not want to attend. And clearly we'll need to try and work with those families to understand what the blocks and barriers are. But what this paper also describes is almost a safety net in terms of the role that Food for Thought and Community Action Derby can play, working with us in trying to identify those families that might be harder to reach or might not want to take advantage of the holiday activity and food programme, to make sure that we give them the right support. And we've talked about that in the context of vouchers and or food parcels. There's got to be an element of choices in that. I think Bernard also referenced the two community shops that are coming up, so that will also be another option, and it just gives parents a level of dignity and choice around how and what to choose, and how to engage in this moving forward. So I think, you know, the key thing really is the design of the programme now, and that is the next step. The paper today is trying to get an in principle agreement to this being our approach to how we tackle food poverty. It's now going to be really important for us to design the programme to try and maximise impact, maximise take up, but also to make sure that we're working with our partners so that we've got that safety net there for people that either don't want to engage or that may not want to engage, or you know, might want to do something slightly differently in terms of a parcel rather than activity. Bernard, do you want to add to that at all in terms of the conversations with the voluntary sector, or just the thinking around the design?
The bit that I would like to add, Chair, is that the conversations we've been having over the last several weeks and months about this particular issue is really leveraging the insight that these organisations have about which families are capable, if that's the right phrase, of using vouchers. And there are some we know who we have been working with across that partnership where perhaps a bit more of a prescribed approach to a food parcel would be necessary. So that's really reiterating the point that Andy was making. We're acutely aware. Well, actually, Chair, we have some of these processes in place for issuing vouchers and have had for some time. It's more about how do we ensure that we target that those most vulnerable customers can access that service.
So, Chair, if I can just come back in, I don't think
Absolutely.
any of them three questions were specifically answered. So the first question was, how many children, based on previous attendance at these clubs, do we expect to attend the clubs? What's happening in the 4 weeks where I think the way I've read the report, there is no provision? And thirdly, and most importantly, going back to that comment about anybody who can't attend the clubs will get a food parcel or a voucher. In that comment, am I reading out of the currently 10,766 children who we have on our free school meal list, each and every one of those will be able to get a voucher if they can't attend an activity club?
Well, what the report describes is that we will be developing the holiday activity programme, and we'll be working really hard to encourage children and young people to attend, and really trying to target those that might be harder to reach and may not want to attend. But what the report describes is a wraparound service, the opportunities there for provision from April through to December. If you look at the fourth bullet point under 4.9, Baggy, you know, there is the opportunity there to try and ensure that we've got a safety net so that we can both give people choice, because the holiday programme isn't compulsory. It's there to try and support the most vulnerable children, and to try and develop that in a way that's going to provide you know, good activities that young people are going to want to engage in, and well as the opportunity for a meal, but that through that wraparound rounded offer, you know, because people will have choices and some people may not want to engage, it's about providing the other opportunities there to ensure that there is the option of families being able to access, you know, it may be a food parcel, it may be a voucher depending on the context. So, you know, I guess just to reiterate, the key thing for us is to make sure that we try and get the design principles right moving forward, you know, working with those services that are working with the families, be that schools, who are going to be really involved in developing the activities within localities, working with our early help and social care services, working with the voluntary sector. You know, we've got a huge amount of intelligence, as Bernard has said, you know, and we've done a huge amount of work in, and I suppose developing that intelligence and insight during the pandemic, and it's building on that. So I think that, you know, these are going to be really important building blocks in making this as effective as and impactful as we can on families, in what I would argue is probably going to be a more resilient and more sustainable programme moving forward, because, you know, I'm all about trying to, you know, engage and affect change, you know, being a social worker, you know, and that's going to be really, I think, important in terms of the work that we try and do with families moving forward.
Okay, can I just bring in Councillor Ralston at this point, please? You have something to contribute?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Baggy, totally understand the questions that you're putting here. I think it is important to acknowledge that of those 10,700, I think it would be, you know, it's completely justifiable that not everybody would be able to attend for whatever reason. Now, if those reasons are we're on holiday, then understandably, as a council, if you can afford a holiday, it's not an need that those people would necessarily need a food voucher during that time. But what if there is the rationale and the reasoning for not being able to attend is a wide variety of different points, then there is an opportunity here to establish the fact that food for thought are always there. There is always a support mechanism in place, and the schools can work with them and the council themselves. I think the other thing to pick up is the fact that the vouchers, they're all part of the work that we've been doing as a Advice Alliance is with Bernard's team and the welfare reform team. There is that there has always been additional help and support available for those people who need and want to engage with us to you know, look at the way out of their financial crisis. So I think there's lots of challenges that we face, and it's about ensuring that the funding is direct to those most in need. There is a need and want situation in this, and we've got to make sure that those that just want a parcel and are entitled, and part of the free school meals element is that is a system that is a means tested system, you know, so these individuals are in need of support, but we know that there are those out there who are able to balance their own personal budgets and reconcile to this, to know that they've got the support for their holidays and everything else. So it's about making sure that those that need to be focused and need that support are recognised, and this is the best way to do that in a way that isn't just a one-size-fits-all, here's a voucher, because I don't think it helps tackle the real issues that are at point within in the city.
Councillor Shank, I will give you another opportunity to raise queries, but I'd like to bring in Councillor Skelton if I can.
Can we just finish on those 3 points then, Matt? Just for
can I just first just hold that thought? Well, no, just hold that thought, Councillor Shank, because I do want to bring Councillor Skelton in, and then you can have another opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. My points were particularly going back to the actual motion from November. It does mention about families who are in receipt of universal credit and those that are on low incomes, because not all people who are in receipt of universal credit or on a low income are actually entitled to free school meals, and yet they are still what anybody would reasonably describe as in poverty. So what is going to be done for those families who are just that bit above the threshold, so for the holidays, but also for lockdowns as well, because you know somebody might be working in the family, but if they're on a reduced amount due to being furloughed, then they really will be in quite difficult circumstances. So if that could be answered, how are those people going to be catered for?
It's a fair challenge, Councillor Skelton. Andy or Nicola or Bernard, which of you would like to respond to that?
I can pick up on the element around universal credit, and I appreciate the rationale for this point within this motion. I think what we need to realise, though, is that the universal credit system is not within the council's gift, if you like. It's not part of our information that we've provided, and with those that receive universal credits may be part or not part of families and have children. I think, although I understand the premise of it, I think the key here is to allow schools to be able to identify those that are in need and that may not fit into the free school meals voucher sort of areas, because at the end of the day, there's we know that there will be people that are emerging out of the COVID pandemic that will have be in a financial situation that they've never experienced before. There will be people who have never claimed anything before other than their child benefits, which is a standard child scheme. But I think within that, a lot of this is within our understanding of the additional funding that we've put aside as a support mechanism in the future for those people that may be affected. So I absolutely understand the premise of what the universal credit element of the motion specifies, but I think we have to be clear that it isn't in our gift to identify those numbers through that system, and that the free school meals and working with our partners, including Food for Thought, including the schools directly, is that we ensure that we target and get to the right people at the right times.
Any contribution from officers, or has that covered that issue? No. Councillor Skelton, then, in interest of fairness, have you got any follow-up or any further questions before I ask Councillor Graves?
That you do give some careful thought to that how those people are going to be able to access help, because at some point they might not need it week in, week out, but they may well need it, say, at the end of the month or something like that. And the other thing, of course, right at the in the end of the motion, near the end, it was talking about the council resolving to write to Secretary of State for Education, Secretary of State for Health, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, asking them to implement the recommendations of the Child Food Poverty Task Force as a matter of urgency. So I was just wanting to know, has that been done and who wrote? And can we have a copy of the letter, please?
We'll certainly provide the letter to all group leaders. It hasn't been done yet, but will be done imminently. It will include the decision, if the Cabinet does agree this afternoon, the details of this and what you've just suggested as well. Councillor Graves, do you have any questions or queries at this stage?
No questions from me.
Okay. Right. Councillor Shanker, I did promise to come back to you. So have you got some, if you can keep it specifically towards the queries that you still have, or clarifications, please?
Brilliant. So just back to the three questions, and with the last time I asked them, and if you can't answer them, then I'll just please say that. So how many children do we expect will turn up to the holiday activities and food programme? What's the provision for the 4 weeks, which I see in the report that there isn't any? And again, the most fundamental in this paper is, out of the 10,766 children who've received free meals, if one of those or all of those say we can't get to this activity club, we'd rather have a free school meal voucher, will we provide them with that voucher?
Thank you, Councillor Shanker. I mean, clearly you're not satisfied with the responses that you've had thus far. I don't know whether officers could clarify that any further than they have done previously.
Baggy, let me come back on the answers. I think I'm just going to reiterate what I've already said, because we need to move forward now, subject to recommendations today, in designing the programme that's outlined in the paper, so that we can maximise attendance for children and young people who are eligible for free school meals across the city in locality, so that we can absolutely try and ensure that as many children and young people attend as possible. But clearly within that there's going to be an element of choice, and there's also going to be an element of some young people and some families not wanting to engage, and it may be at particular points during the school year, as Nicola said, that it may be appealing or it may not be appealing. What the report outlined in 4.9 are the options there, and the potential provision there for families if they don't engage in the programme, in terms of the 10,000 or so food parcels that would be available between April and December. And I think the report also talks about the fact that we would dynamically review demand as we move forward, in terms of the take-up of the parcels, and whether there will be any future demand as we move through April and through to December, particularly given the kind of challenging context we're in at the moment, some of which I think goes back to what Councillor Skelton was saying, so that we can absolutely try and maximise the way in which we approach this, based around the holiday and food programme, which is the anchor really of what's described in the paper.
Thank you for that. For me, before I move on to dealing with the exec scrutiny recommendations, for me, two notable items here in this report are 3.3, which is for me very key about building a sustainable programme with resilience, and also 4.12, which talks about a partnership approach and working together on this, within the community, council and partners as well. I think that's extremely important to embrace, because it's the core, it's the foundation of what we're trying to do here. Councillor Wilson, do you want to cover the recommendations, or would you like me to do that?
No, that's fine. I'll cover the recommendations.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I'll just bring them up in front of me. My apologies. Unless we can bring them up on screen. Oh, in fact, I've got them here. So the first recommendation was to recommend to the Council Cabinet that it implements the the motion agreed at full council to provide children and families with support via vouchers for all school holidays in 2021 and beyond. I think we have to resolve to not accept that recommendation, purely on the rationale that we've set out here that we're tackling this in a much wider partnership approach, working with the schools and are tackling the fundamental issues around child poverty rather than just a voucher scheme. I think that our motion, the paper here today, goes above and beyond that, and the rationale for going past 2021 and beyond, and it says and beyond. I think at this point in time, based on the information that we have to just tackle the 2021 and look to how we establish going forward this in the future once we've had the time to implement the paper here today. So I would say that we don't accept that recommendation as is. The second recommendation is to recommend that the Council Cabinet, that the Poverty Commission considers the outputs of the work of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Review Board in 1819, the topic review there on child poverty in the city, as part of its deliberations. I think we can accept that recommendation. I know that Yvonne was key and involved in that herself, so it's very keen to look at that as part of the continuation and as part of the Poverty Board. And the third recommendation was to recommend to the Council Cabinet that these items on additional financial support for families during the school holidays to be included in the MTFP presented in the council in February. Obviously, we don't need to accept that recommendation. This is part of this paper, which will be we as a cabinet will present within that MTFP going forward. So my recommendation as standing in for Councillor Williams would be to accept the Scrutiny Board's resolution of item 2 and to discard 1 and 3 at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Okay, so given that, coupled with asking Cabinet to agree to recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5, are we agreed?
Councillor Holmes, I did indicate right at the beginning when I spoke that I had some more
Councillor
questions.
Shanker, I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to explore those with officers and cabinet members offline now. And I've given
a legal requirement at 7.2, which
okay, Councillor Shanker, if you
come back into.
Okay, one question then, please, Councillor Shanker, specifically on that item.
Brilliant. So at 7.2, and I think maybe Simon or Nicola would be best placed to answer this. It says, subject to the recommendations that you're about to rush through, outlined in the report being supported, it is proposed that the increased cost to be funded from an increase 2021-22 council tax from 4.49% to 4.99%. And if you correlate those figures with the draft budget consultation papers that have been released in December and are due back at Cabinet later this month, and at the Budget Council meeting in February, you can see 1.99% of that is from the council tax increase and 2.5% is from the adult social care precept. So to enable us to go to 4.99%, as this report suggests and you're about to vote on, that would mean the adult social care precept has got to go to 3%, which is fine. That's legal. It's within the wish of Cabinet to do that. But what is either an error or at best case or at worst case just absolutely totally disingenuous is to pin the maximum council tax increase on the back of the most vulnerable families in Derby and hungry children. So what is it? Is this?
What is your question, Councillor Shanker, please?
So my question is to be able to fund this paper, which doesn't meet the requirements of the full council motion. Are we legally able to use the adult social care precept, as this report suggests? Was there an error on this report? And is this increase coming from the 1.99% of the proposed council tax increase?
Thank you for the question. Okay, Simon, would you like to answer that?
Yes. Cabinet approved MTFP for consultation on the 16th of December, which will come back to Cabinet in February. As I have had the opportunity to speak to Councillor Shanker before this and highlighted that council tax is but one funding source for local government in terms of setting the budget. There's also business rates, there's also the savings proposals and pressures that we build into the budget. So the council tax is never hypothecated to specific schemes. Paragraph 7.2 talks about the ability of the council as part of its overall MTFP setting to utilise the flexibility the Secretary of State gave us to increase council tax by 4.99%. That's a 0.5% increase on what was put out in December. And it is very important. This is not hypothecated to social care or anything else. This is about the overall funding framework for local government as permitted within the referendum criteria to set the council's budget to deliver a balanced budget with no recurrent use of reserves. So hopefully that just highlights that it is legal, it is within the framework the government gave us, and it's actually for the budget that the Cabinet have issued for consultation for the next financial year. And it was important we highlighted any movement from that consultation, so it was transparent and clear. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Just a quick response then back to that, Matt, just for Simon.
Very, very briefly, Councillor Shanker, please.
I'll be as brief as I can. So I get the point, and
it needs to be a question, please, Councillor Shanker. A question, please, Councillor Shanker, to clarify.
No schemes are ever hypothecated. No schemes are ever specifically hypothecated. But yet at 7.2, we say that this proposal is specifically going to result in that 0.5% increase in council tax. You can't have it both ways. It's one or the other.
Can I speak, Chair, please? I think it's important. I think the answer to your question.
Just answer that question on a factual basis. If we're going to be.
I'm going
Councillor
to answer
Shanker,
that
please,
question. I'm the Cabinet member.
Can you offer the courtesy of a response, please?
And please don't interrupt me, because I'm trying my very best, Mr. Shanker, to try and get the message across to you as clearly as possible, because obviously the information that Simon's given to you pre this meeting and during this meeting hasn't been able to enable you to understand how this is being done. The reality is that the adult social care pressures of this council well exceed the 3% of increase in council tax. As you identified, the budget proposal that we put forward for consultation did not recognise a full increase of that 3%, purely to help, and I think you will recognise that as we had a balanced budget, that we worked together with officers to identify what was, the prioritisation of this council, and we felt as a cabinet that if we could in any shape or form ensure that the pressure put out to people within the Derby City, if we could reduce the council tax increase by any amount, that we would look to do that. The reality is that following on from that, there has been a detailed investigation as part of the motion that you brought forward, and has identified an additional pressure that needs to be funded. In order to do that, we within this paper, within our legal rights, are doing that, is identifying where that potential could come from, which would include this. And although it hasn't gone out to consultation, we have to be clear as a cabinet where we intend to get the funding from. You, however, haven't been able to identify where you would like to get the £2 million from that you think should be going out for voucher schemes. You haven't brought anything forward. You failed to bring anything forward previously when we've had budget meetings. It's all about politicising this yourself, and I think it's really disingenuous that you continue to make out that this is about us trying to politicise this. We are trying as our best as a cabinet and as officers to try and do the best by this city during the most difficult time in history. We are in the midst of a pandemic, Councillor Shanker, and the reality is that we are doing our very best to ensure that we engage with our partners and provide what is needed for our residents. So I think we've answered that question threefold, and I think we can move on, Chair. Thank you.
I would agree, and I'd like to thank everybody for their open and respectful way that we've dealt with this. So I think it's probably best now if we move forward to the recommendation. So I'm asking Cabinet to agree 2.1 through to 2.5. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Okay, item 11, which is Housing Revenue Account Business Plan 2021 to 2051, introduced by Simon.
So thank you, Chair, and I've also got on the call Rachel North, Strategic Director for Communities and Place, and Ian Fullinger, Head of Strategic Housing, who will be able to assist in any questions that members may have. So this report details a 30-year business plan for our housing stock. Members will be aware we got approximately 12,700 houses managed by our high-performing arm's length management organisation, Derby Homes. The good management of our housing stock has allowed us to create this investment plan, which is for £108 million over the next 3 years. And that is both investment in our existing stock, but also bringing in new housing to meet need and also to address the losses which continue under right to buy housing under the government permitted framework. Looking at here, you can see a couple of graphs which are really important. One is about using our existing HRA reserve to, in a sense, make that transformational change in our housing stock. And the second is ensuring that we do not have to pay back to the government right to buy capital receipts in respect of being able to spend it within 3 years. And you can see that for a number of years, we were just almost equal to the line, but our spending plans are ramping that up to actually invest in our own housing stock. And we also have permission to provide money to registered providers to meet the need as well. And members will recollect that quite often we bring reports to this committee to seek permission to acquire either a group of houses or single houses to meet need. And we know that especially need is in the larger housing stocks or larger housing sizes to meet that. The report details the payments to Derby Homes in respect of management fee and maintenance fee. You can see the increases there are relatively small, and again, all the indices are that does deliver value for money in terms of their management and their targeting of that resource. And finally, Chair, the report details some increases in rents and service charges, detailed in paragraph 4.12. But as you can see, the rent increase is 1.5%, and for a number of properties, service charges are 1.1%. And in the context of the service provided and also the national framework, that is nice to be able to set rent levels at that level. Happy to take any questions, Chair, along with my colleagues.
Thank you. Before I ask if any other officer would like to contribute, just to say the Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to note the report. Before I ask if there's any questions from group leaders or queries from group leaders, can I ask if any other officer would like to contribute at this stage, or even a Cabinet member?
Just to welcome the report, Chair, and say that the work we've been doing recently, and it refers to the earlier item about empty properties and using the right to buy receipts to purchase or part purchase those empty properties along with the HRA has now put us in a position where we are able to not be in a position to give government money back from our right to buy receipts. You will note from the graph about the HRA that we're going into a dip. Now, people may not understand that the HRA is a 30-year business plan, and it includes cyclical maintenance such as kitchens, bathrooms, renovations to properties, and that 30-year cycle bottoms out in around 2032, 33, and that is the height of our cyclical maintenance program. So that will mean that the next round of cyclical maintenance will be completed by that time, and then we will be able to build up the HRA reserves to then cope with the next round of cyclical maintenance. So it does make sense. So I'm happy to recommend this. I understand that the Tenants Participation Panel and the Derby Association of Community Partners have been given sight of this and have made comment, and they are supportive at this stage of the 1.5% rent increase and 1.1% service increases where they are applicable.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Webb. I'll just ask, I'm not sure if Councillor Graves is still with us. Does he have any questions? I'm not quite sure if he is. If not, I'll move on to Councillor Skelton. Do you have any questions or queries? And if
No,
not,
Chair,
okay. Councillor Shanker?
None on this item, Chair.
Okay, if there are no further questions or queries or contributions, then I'll ask Cabinet to agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. And I believe, if I have that right, that is the end of this Cabinet meeting. So I'll thank you very much for your attendance and your contributions, and I will see you